It began with a signature, one piece of paper in Washington that was supposed to protect American industry. But instead, that stroke of a pen unleashed chaos. Within hours, billions of dollars vanished, factories slowed, and America's most trusted ally slammed the door shut. The world had just watched the copper trade, the quiet backbone of modern life, explode into a full-blown international crisis. Copper isn't glamorous, and most people don't think about it. Yet it's in every home, every car, every phone, every mile of electric wiring that powers the United States. It is the invisible metal that makes the modern world run. And overnight, Donald Trump turned it into the flashpoint of a battle that could redefine America's economic future. The announcement came without warning. Trump declared a 50% tariff on copper imports, invoking Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act and labeling the metal a matter of national security. The words hit markets like an earthquake. On the COMEX exchange, copper futures spiked to $5.95 per pound, the highest ever recorded. In a single day, $4.2 billion evaporated from America's balance sheets. Traders stood stunned as numbers flashed red across their screens. Domestic buyers scrambled. Costs soared instantly. And that was just the beginning. To most Americans, copper tariffs sounded like just another trade skirmish, but to Ottawa, it was a declaration of mistrust. Canada supplies nearly half of all U.S. refined copper. Mines in Quebec and British Columbia keep American factories running. So when Washington slammed down its tariff hammer, Canada didn't lash out emotionally. Instead, it retaliated with cold, precise calculation. Ottawa froze contracts with U.S. buyers. Major corporations like Glencore and Hudbay Minerals redirected shipments across the Pacific. Japan, South Korea, and China received new offers. The message from the North was blunt: trust broken, partnership suspended. For decades, Canadian copper had flowed south almost automatically. That era ended overnight. Factories in Detroit, Ohio, and Texas felt the hit almost immediately. Copper, once cheap and reliable, suddenly became scarce. Auto companies calculated that every electric vehicle rolling off the line now cost nearly $90 more to produce. That figure might seem small until you multiply it by millions of cars. Electronics manufacturers warned of delays. Construction firms scrambled as wiring costs spiked by tens of thousands per project. Utility companies, squeezed by rising copper wire prices, filed for electricity rate hikes. By the time households saw their bills climb, Washington's decision was no longer a distant headline. It was personal. The Chicago Mercantile Exchange reported copper prices up 13% in just one day. Meanwhile, in London, prices slipped as investors feared American demand would collapse. A dangerous price gap opened 25% between U.S. and global markets, fueling arbitrage and speculation. Traders exploited the cracks, deepening instability. A policy designed as protection had become America's greatest vulnerability. What stunned Washington most wasn't the immediate retaliation. It was Canada's plan for the future. Ottawa announced a $1.8 billion investment package to expand ports, warehouses, and railways to serve Asia directly. Copper exports were no longer tied to American buyers. Instead, Canada began locking in long-term contracts with Tokyo, Seoul, and Beijing. For the first time, Canada was no longer America's junior partner in trade. It was now a strategic competitor with global leverage. And it had chosen its path deliberately: diversification, independence, and new alliances far from U.S. shores. The tariff exposed a brutal truth. The United States produces only about half the refined copper it consumes. Refining capacity at home covers a mere 5% of national demand. Instead of growing, many facilities have shut down. Arizona and New Mexico plants can't fill the gap. That left America trapped. With Canada cutting shipments, the U.S. turned to Chile, Peru, and Mexico. But their capacity was limited, and prices there surged. The shortages weren't temporary. They were structural. Copper is everywhere in power grids, EV batteries, wind turbines, and 5-gram towers. Without it, progress halts. And now, the supply chain that powered U.S. industry had been severed at the root. Economists drew chilling parallels. In the 1930s, President Hoover imposed tariffs to protect U.S. industry. Instead, the world retaliated, global trade collapsed, and the Great Depression deepened. Now, nearly a century later, Washington risked making the same mistake. Protectionism, meant to guard American jobs, instead isolated the economy. What was framed as a shield had become a trap. And unlike the 1932nd, today's economy is far more interconnected. Copper shortages rippled across sectors, from energy to construction to consumer goods. This time, the fallout wouldn't be limited to factories. It would hit every household. The real weight of the crisis showed up in daily life. Families saw higher electric bills as utilities raised rates. Homebuyers faced more expensive builds as wiring costs ballooned. Phones, laptops, and cars all climbed in price. Tesla and Ford paused production on entire lines of EVs. Michigan and Indiana factories furloughed workers. Smaller manufacturers producing copper wiring went bankrupt as contracts shifted overseas. Meanwhile, Canada thrived. Mines that once served Detroit were now supplying Seoul. Raw copper from British Columbia shipped to Asia for refining, cutting the U.S. out entirely. Canada's economy reoriented itself in record time, and American buyers were left empty-handed. What looked like a tariff dispute revealed something deeper, a shift in global power. Canada proved that even a smaller economy, if it controls a vital resource, can challenge the world's leading superpower. By pivoting copper exports to Asia, Ottawa not only secured new markets, it reshaped alliances. The U.S., once at the center, now finds itself on the outside. Experts warn this is only the beginning. As Canada cements deals with Beijing and Tokyo, America's ability to influence global copper prices shrinks. For the first time in modern history, Washington risks losing control of an industrial supply chain it once dominated. Trump's tariff was pitched as a bold move to protect American industry. But the result has been the opposite: higher costs, tighter supply, and an economy struggling under its own policies. Copper, the metal that quietly powered modern life, has now become a weapon. Canada wielded it with precision, turning dependence into strength. Washington, in contrast, exposed its weaknesses for the world to see. The question now is simple. Was this a bold defense of national security, or a catastrophic miscalculation that will haunt the United States for decades? One thing is certain: the crisis is far from over. The world is watching, and the consequences are only just beginning.